Bibb County Board of Education for Budget Work Session 1. Today is Monday, March 11, 2024. At this time, we have the agenda in front of the board members. May I have a motion to approve the agenda? So moved by Dr. Dillard. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Johnson. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it, and the agenda is passed. The first and only item on our agenda is the Fiscal Year 2025 General Fund Budget Work Session 1, and I'll recognize Superintendent Dr. Dan A. Sims.
Thank you, Board President Freeman, and good afternoon, board members. Good afternoon to all of those who have joined us as well. I want to welcome everybody to our first General Fund Budget Work Session. It's been a busy but productive season, and we look forward to using today to set the course for what we hope is a successful collaboration as we reach approval of our FY25 budget. Our mission: the Bibb County School District maximizes student achievement and social and emotional well-being, building a sense of community and safe, equitable learning environments. And our vision: students are empowered to learn, lead, innovate, and serve as productive and caring citizens within their chosen paths of success. Our continued goal is to align our resources to fulfill this mission and vision. I'll be driving these first slides just to lay the foundation for this entire season, and our Chief Financial Officer, Eric Bush, will drive the majority of this presentation. We further recognize our goals and guiding principles that drive our strategic plan, with the ultimate desire for every student to have a for-me experience, resulting in every graduate being prepared to make an informed decision about their next step in life. We recognize how important our budget is in ensuring we have sufficient human and physical resources in service to this end. And in our strategy map, our aim is to ensure this budget takes us on the journey to fulfill every community-inspired aspect of this diagram, keeping in mind our theory of action that is primarily driven by engaged, competent adults. This session represents an initial glimpse of the FY25 budget, given the information we have so far, so that we can receive feedback from you, our Board of Education. Several areas will be covered as indicated in our roadmap, to include some of the work we have engaged in up to this point, along with concerns as we look into and beyond this upcoming fiscal year. We also acknowledge in our preliminary takeaway the impact of critical factors that have been on the table since before now, and hope this session further informs you as we start this journey. Again, our Chief Financial Officer, Eric Bush, will lead the majority of this session, but I felt it important to remind and ground us in already communicated budget priorities. If you recall, we have 5 key categories where our budget priorities sit, and I'll take just a quick moment to refresh those for everybody. In terms of literacy, we want to ensure that our resources are appropriate and sufficient to produce above grade level readers on all levels. In the area of readiness, we must ensure our programming and structures emphasize readiness on all levels leading up to graduation, keeping a keen focus on full access to future opportunities after high school for all students. In the space of engagement, we have started significant work on building internal strength of engagement and see the need to complete this work in order to get maximum inputs and outputs from all students and staff. In the area of capacity and retention, we want to position ourselves to recruit, retain, and build the best and brightest for our students who deserve the best, keeping in mind the importance of offering the most competitive salaries possible as a key factor in this endeavor. And finally, as an umbrella to the aforementioned priorities, we want to continue to improve our work in the space of school improvement with the most advantageous infrastructure. This will require the continued building of school-level capacity and appropriate oversight that extends our school improvement work to a daily and intentional focus. We've done much work to prepare for this season and in response to the board's request of us to exercise diligence in looking for opportunities for cost savings. We continue our audit of programs and resources, which includes ARP and CARES funded entities and personnel, along with upcoming school-level input for final decision-making. Additionally, the District Budget and Finance Advisory has proven to be a game changer in educating both internal and external stakeholders on budget processes, allocation of resources, associated costs, and related matters, while empowering them to share in the space of input on our final recommendations. That being said, Today, we present preliminary budget recommendations for FY25 under each one of our budget priority areas. In the area of literacy and readiness, we've already found cost savings in recommending Canvas as a solution for course completion and recovery, but also know that we recommend retaining needed funding for those resources that meet the needs of our students and in response to our ongoing audit. With engagement, our recommendation is in service to engagement work we have already started, seeing this work all the way to completion and sustainability at the next level. In terms of capacity and retention, we recommend raises for all staff in addition to the $2,500 approved by the state in order to get us closer to being competitive in the field. And finally, we want in this budget to improve our focus on school improvement throughout the year for all of our schools as we consider internal and external supports to make this happen. I've spoken with most of you one-on-one already about this and look forward to completing these discussions for approval consideration in the coming weeks. I will now turn this session over to Eric Bush, our Chief Financial Officer. I think this is his first budget session he's leading, and we know he's going to do a fantastic job. And we look forward to your questions at the conclusion of this session as we will work together to provide you with the best possible answers. And we have several school personnel in addition to our central office personnel to make sure that we're able to provide the best answers possible to anything that you may ask. And thank you. Now, Mr. Bush, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Sims. Good afternoon, President Freeman, board members, community.
Microphone.
Can y'all hear me?
That'd be on.
While he gets that fixed, we'll get started. Our first slide is showing our general information. This is just some information highlights from this year. As we talked about last year, certified health insurance and classified health insurance continues to increase. The state announced and is proposed in the governor's budget that has yet to be passed another certified health insurance increase of $2,160 per person per year. That's what you see on the top line. The classified state health insurance, there's an increase phasing in from 2024 to 2027, which will get us all the way to the $18,960 that this certified is. This year represents a $3,000 increase of that phase-in. The next thing we want to talk about that's a big expense in this district is technology expenses. This preliminary budget does not include the need for technology upgrades and replacements over the next 2 years leading up to SPLOST funding that is on the SPLOST FY26 eSPLOST considerations that will be voted for by our community. Examples of needs in the district are panel refreshes, which are an average of 7 years old, one-to-one device deployment. We initiated that in 2020, and those devices are aging out, and there's a need to replace those if we wish to move forward with that initiative. And ongoing network upgrades for district functionality. That includes our cybersecurity, our wireless networks, anything that it takes to power computers and devices in the district. We're also facing inflationary pressures, as we all know, in our operating costs. Next, I want to point out some assumptions for this whole budget process. Right now, we are very early in the process. It's March, and we have until June for this to take place. The governor's budget still needs to pass. We have to get tax digest information from our county. We are implying no increase in the millage rate in this first scenario. And the equalization funding that is determined from the Georgia Department of Education each year varies widely and could have a huge impact on our overall budget. And then we've had budgeted for minor staff increases due to enrollment changes over the years. GSBA updates us on legislative issues each year coming through the budget. The most notable one this year that's going to hit us is a good thing. They're going to provide $104 million for school security grants, which we'll receive a portion of, and $205 million. They're going to increase the transportation budget to $205 million, from about $140 million, which is a significant increase to support transporting our students. Next slide. Now we'll start through the budget process. We've kind of laid this slideshow out to show you each step. First step is to project our enrollment for the upcoming school year. We get our enrollment numbers from the REAA department, which is a Research, Evaluation, Assessment, and Accountability department. That information is given to myself and my budget team, as well as the Superintendent of Human Resources, to start the process to see how many teachers we need based on the students sitting in our classrooms. This first enrollment projection shows the elementary schools in Northwoods Academy. Right now, we're only projecting a 49 student loss in elementary school. The next slides will show middle and high school. As you see, we're having a little increase in middle and high school. We're expecting 176 students in middle school and an increase of 151 students in high school, for a total of 276 students overall. The next slide is determining staff requirements in individual schools based on those enrollment numbers. So as you'll see as we move to the next slide, we will start, this is our school allocation formula that was adopted by the board several years ago and continues to be adjusted as needed. But this tells us how many principals, assistant principals, counselors, all the way through a school, how much staff to employ based on the number of students in the building. And we can go through these slides. These will be in the slide deck for your information. I think if you go 2 more slides, we can work through the next one. This brings us to our calculations on our initial staff allocation. So this is important, knowing that those additional 276 students and how many staff we will need to support those. Thank you. So the picture we have in front of you today is the total of all schools combined. So as you see, working down from the top, pre-K, kindergarten, grades 1, 2, and 3. On the far right column, you can see how many additional teachers or support we will need based on each enrollment number. So if we go down to the next slide, and one more, we're going to start to see the support staff for the schools. That's all the administration staff, starting at the principals, assistant principals, counselors, etc. You'll see the biggest increase in that bottom section in paraprofessionals, and that's to support increases in those grades. We're going to have one more slide, we'll see the total. So we're calculating at this point, which is early still, at 37 additional staff in the school buildings. The next step in this process is determining our operational requirements and requests from additional positions at the school and the system level, which means all of our central office staff and any support staff for school. I work with the budget manager to meet with each department head and senior cabinet supervisor to discuss their needs and their outlines. At this point in the process, this is still ongoing in the district, so we don't have details about those specific needs in this presentation. They will be in the April presentation. The next big piece is determining the cost of salary and benefits for all staff, which we can do a pretty good job of at this time, and the next couple slides will illustrate those calculations. As the enrollment was showed before, this elementary school projection shows the salaries, benefits, and operational costs for each school. It also shows their enrollment, their staff FTEs requirements, and total cost per student. You'll also notice that the projected enrollments for the K through 12 in red are those schools that are below the state's requirement of, or the basic school. The target enrollment for each school the state sets at 450 students. Those in red are below those marks. In middle school, we're seeing that we have 2 under that state limit of 624 students. total expenditures of around $40.2 million. In high school, similar expenses of $47 million, with 4 of our high schools below the limit of 970 students. We go down to the next section, we're going to see our operational and central office and department costs. That's going to be the next 2 slides. And the number everybody's going to want to see is on the total expenditures. The bottom line is $261 million. That price includes all of the recommendations for the $2,500 raise, the 2% additional salary increase for certified staff, and a 5% increase for classified staff. That's our preliminary total expense at this point. The next slide is detailing out the health insurance increases and the phase-ins that we discussed earlier. As you'll see on the left-hand side, certified increases are set this year for $2,160. The classified increases are set for $3,000 and will continue to increase for the next 2 fiscal years. This slide shows our benefit rate changes. This is another way to view those health insurance increases. You'll see that the certified increase 11.39%, while the classified health insurance is increasing 26.4%. And there's a small inflationary adjustments for the Social Security contributions that are required by all employees. The next step in the process is to estimate our revenues. Preliminary revenues are projected prior to receiving preliminary revenue information from Godot or the tax commissioner. So we're heavily basing these off the prior year revenue streams and what limited information we have available to make adjustments as needed. This screen shows the FY24 budgeted revenues versus the budgeted and projected FY25 revenues. As you'll see, there are very minor changes, only a $3 million net increase to it's a $1.9 million increase to $241.9 billion. The biggest changes in this are listed on the side in the footnotes for variances. We're losing some indirect cost revenue due to the expiration of CARES and ARP funding, so we won't recover indirect costs on those anymore, which we had planned on. We're also having a decrease in bus bonds this year of $1.2 million. Our grant is moving back to the Title I federal funds of $156,000 and a little bit of E-rate funding where we took advantage of a one-time initiative last year. That's going to reduce our E-rate by about $750,000. We are increasing our QBE allotment from the state by $3.9 million. That's mainly due to the $2,500 raises that they pay for our certified staff. The next screen is going to show our preliminary budget in total. Beginning with our fund balance of $58.8 million, we're estimating those revenues at $241.9 million and expenditures of $261,800,000. That budgets a deficit of $19.9 million, leaving us with an ending fund balance of $38.9 million. The assumptions here, though, that no revenue changes are noted except as seen in the prior slide, and this includes the expenses for the proposed salary raises spoken about earlier. The next step in the process is the board work sessions are held for information and feedback. The board budget work sessions are held to share information with the Board of Education and to receive their input for budget decisions. Each consecutive work session shares more information about the budget as new data is received from Godot and the Tax Commissioner's Office on revenue and the decisions made about staffing and expenditures. Some concerns and considerations at this time echo the same that were there last year. So these slides will be seen in last year's too, with some updates. Our district continues to fall further behind in our certified and classified salary schedules as compared to surrounding districts and districts similar size, with significant gaps in administrative level pay. So how does this affect recruitment and retention? And what is the possible solutions? The possible solutions are to increase salaries and become competitive. That is going to cost local dollars. And the only way to really increase revenue is to consider millage rates or lower our expenditures. The next is what will be the impact of the salary study and how will that be recommended? Similar sentiment here, increase salaries to be competitive, and all would be locally funded. Increase revenue or lower current expenditures. Next, our district has a history of rolling back the millage rate. Unlike many other districts, this prevents us from receiving increased tax revenue and increased salaries accordingly. Is the board and community prepared to consider raising the millage rate, or at a minimum, not rolling back the millage rate as an option to provide funds for teachers and staff and to help on recruitment and retention? The next slide. How we fund desired needed changes for our strategic plan. As you see here, the possible solution is to reduce current expenditures or increase revenues. And can we continue to operate small neighborhood schools with increasing costs and inability to hire and maintain enough quality staff for all schools? Will the community understand the need to right-size the number of facilities we operate to maximize our limited resources to provide the best for our students and staff? The possible solution here is to solicit a consultant to facilitate schools consolidation considerations, share findings and recommendations with the board for the FY26 decision-making process. And there's a small consideration still here on the table. The GNETS program is still wanting to come to the general fund, which is going to change the model of that program, and it could have some various cost implications involved with it too. Next, the school nutrition programs have experienced calls for food products and supplies and increased staffing shortages. Will this affect the general fund? That is something we're looking very closely at. And as we talked about technology costs earlier, how will we keep the funding for the one-to-one computer initiative and support growing with growing technology costs all around the district and our nation? And what effect, if any, does FE have on the voucher program that's passed by the state? We're hoping it's not much, but if students have more choice in schools, it could affect our enrollment. Next, we're going to highlight the millage rate, where we're at now as compared to other counties. Currently, the value of one mill in Bibb County is set at $5,600,754 per mill. As you see in this chart, Bibb County is sitting at 14.64 mills, and there's a change from 23 to 22 as compared to other counties around us. Next, we have some graphs that are updated from the Metro RISA, who does a teacher salary study each year. And we just wanted to show the differences in state averages, Middle Georgia RISA averages, and the Bibb County teacher salaries. This slide we're looking at now for our T4 level, bachelor degree teachers. The next slide will show our T5 master's level teachers and where we compare on those scales. The biggest differences you see on these are really our entry levels. The 10 plus years are a little closer in line, but we still lag behind the entry to 5-year level. This is between our Middle Georgia districts and where we fall. Again, this data will be in the slideshows for your review. The next one is those master level teacher salaries in the Middle Georgia districts compared to the Middle Georgia districts. The last couple slides are showing our admin salaries compared to other surrounding RISA districts. The next slide will show those admin salaries compared to similar districts of the same size in between 20,000 students and 50,000 students. The enrollment comparison on this slide is also shown for additional data. The next couple slides we want to show and kind of outline where we're headed and where we could head. The first slide has assumptions in it where there's no change in the number of facility operated, no change in FTEs, student FTEs, no change in millage rates, no salary increases, operational costs at the same level. And it does include the $2 million cost in the CARES and ARP indirect cost funding. So as we see this next slide, what we're trying to do is show a picture is if we stay the same as we are today, where would we end by 2028? And as you see, we've budgeted deficits of around $10 million each year. We continue to do so. By 2028, we're sitting at a fund balance expenditure ratio of 6.25, which falls below the state's recommended minimum of 8%. The next slide is showing if we do if you approve the estimated salary increases of 2% for for certified and 5% for classified, with no millage rate increase, what happens? And as you can see pretty quickly, we fall below that 8% by 2026 and fall below even into the negative expenditure percentage in 2027 and beyond. So the next steps in this process is the tentative adoption of the budget and public hearings. As we've said before, though, we will have 2 more work sessions before tentative adoption and the public hearings. So our next step is 1 month from now, we'll have work session number 2. Can you go to the next slide? Following the public hearings, the board must adopt the final budget by June 30th or adopt a spending resolution until a budget has been adopted. The millage rates are determined and the public hearings for meetings are held if required by law after the budget is approved. We've displayed the complete budget calendar here. Our next meeting will be April 8th, then May 7th, May 16th, all the way to June 20th until the final adoption of our budget would be held. After that, we would start talking about the millage rate meetings on July 18th through August 19th, if needed. At this time, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, board members, y'all have heard the preliminary presentation. Do any board members have any questions or comments at this time? Ms. Hanlon.
Thank you for your presentation. Appreciate very much your work. I'm looking at slide 39, which is the general fund preliminary budget. What is and I see where we have the amended budget for fiscal 24 fund balance. What is the fund balance approximately as of the most recent month end? What is our current fund balance?
I'm not sure without looking at the budget presentation from last month.
Okay.
It would be in the monthly budget presentation, or the monthly financial report we do each month.
Okay.
So right off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
I will see if it's right here. Okay, thank you.
No, we'll get the answer before you leave, Ms. Hanlon. Thank
But it's
you.
important to know that in January, the fund balance is high because we just got through the collection process for taxes, and we're going to spend a lot of those dollars through June.
Okay.
So it may not be the best indicator of where we'll end.
Okay. That was my question.
Thank you, Ms. Hanlon. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And looking at slide 31, where we see 11 schools in the red, under the 450 that the state would like for us to have. How does that affect our state budget? Do they pay for these schools or?
They do pay, they continue to pay for the schools, yes. But they continue to cost us, revenue because we don't have the students in there to produce the salary necessary. We produce the salary, but it doesn't provide the funding for the administrative staff over and above that would be there for additional students. But no, we get funding and operational costs for those schools.
So the funding for the staff, for the administrative staff,
Yes.
that comes from the local budget?
Some of it does. A lot of it comes from the state though still. So we still get funded for principals, assistant principals, to an extent, and a lot of counselors that are on the QBE formula. But a lot of those support for each school over and above are coming from our local dollars, yes.
So which administrative staff does the state not fund?
You gonna help me with that? They fund a piece of all of them. It's kind of hard to do, but they may give us one AP, but we may fund another AP to support those schools locally. But there's a lot of staff that are there that we support in addition to what the state funds us.
So my last question is,
Yes, ma'am.
why is, if the state's gonna fund us, why is it important for us to know that 11 schools are under enrollment?
I think it's important to look at that because if we have, I'm not suggesting this, but if we have less schools, we have less overhead and operational costs in each facility. So pointing that out shows, that we may have more schools than are possibly needed for our community.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Johnson, if I may add to that question, the main savings that you'll see, given your point that the state will fund, is operational savings. So essentially, let's say hypothetically, we receive funding for said personnel, but we make a decision to consolidate schools. The majority of those savings will be from operational costs in terms of an additional facility. And not so much because what's going to happen is all of those personnel, you essentially won't find a reduction in force that's going to be significant. All those personnel could conceivably go to another space to follow students.
So the main concern will be operating that building itself.
Right, and if I recall, last year we shared specifically in reference to the potential savings of school consolidation. I think it was in the area of $1 million. It could range from $1 to $2 million
Per school?
based up per consolidation.
Thank you.
I hope that helps.
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Does anyone else have questions? Mr. Borton?
Okay, if I read this correctly, we're projecting 37 more employees?
At this point, yes.
Okay. All right. I'm looking at page 13, slide 13. Under literacy readiness, retain needed funding, following completion of a thorough program audit, has that occurred?
Yes, we're in the process of those program audits currently, yes.
Yes, that's an active and ongoing process. We started some time ago, and we're just given the due time that's needed to thoroughly go through. And the last of the steps, thanks, we're at that slide. I don't see that space. Go back one more if you can, please. In terms of the program resource audit, a critical part of that is to include school-level voice and input as it relates to priorities, specifically in terms of those items included in ARP and CARES, but not to exclude items funded through the general fund as we think about what those needs are going to be as we continue to promote literacy and readiness and all things functionality for the district. And once we finish, we will provide a report in terms of the findings of that audit and subsequent recommendations. It's one of the reasons you have not seen significant requests for renewal up to this point, because we're going to be very careful about rationale behind what to renew, as opposed to, if I may say in the past, we've kind of just renewed for renewal's sake in some spaces in the absence of going through this audit process.
So at this point, we don't know the budgetary impact of what this audit will produce?
No, so we don't have the final impact. And what I will say is this, I'm glad you're asking this question. It's going to be impacted in two ways. Number one, let's say hypothetically we find continued opportunities for cost savings. That's going to have to take into account a general fund that sits here ARP and CARES funds, where some of those funds were utilized to take something from general fund and place in ARP, and the decision as to whether or not we need to retain what was originally in the general fund. And then the third bucket of those things in ARP and CARES that were in addition to what was formerly in the general fund. And I mentioned those three buckets to emphasize the importance of us taking careful time in this space to complete comprehensively this entire audit, so that when we come to the Board of Education, in terms of our findings, it is a comprehensive report that we give.
Similarly, under engagement, we see completing engagement efforts, prepare for sustainability. Do we know what that's going to look like and what the budgetary impact will be?
I'll say initially you're talking about a relatively small level of impact, and I'll give you an example. When we received approval from the Board of Education for Gallup, as an example, the whole Gallup piece to get us to the space of self-sufficiency is ideally 3 years. We're finishing up year 2. So one of the pieces that would be included in that potentially would be the continuation of a final year of engagement of Gallup, so that we can get it, as I mentioned in the slide, to make sure that we have sustainability of efforts at the school level impact level, the school impact level, and that would be the majority of those costs in that space.
So we're not sure what those are yet?
No, we're still, we're really just taking our time to make sure that what we bring to this board has gone through and is in response to exactly what the board gave us as a charge back in August. And what we're finding is it's taking us significant hours to sit down and do it right. So we wanted to make sure we provided some preliminary budget information, but more information to come in specific detail as we continue our audit processes. Significant amount of that time will be spent in the remainder of this month of March in anticipation of our April budget work session.
So is that the same situation with the school improvement with potentially added internal and external supports? Are we still in process of that too?
Yes, and actually that is one of the main pieces in our one-on-ones that I've scheduled with everyone in anticipation of our board meeting that speaks to.
Just one other thing. You mentioned about considering right-sizing schools. I assume that means consolidation of schools. Is that interchangeable?
Is that term interchangeable? No. I think that's got to be a consideration at some point.
What does right-sizing mean then?
I would assume consolidation.
If I can respond to that as well, and if you can go to the slides that show the comparisons, and I just want to call out something real quick. If you look at the, I'll wait till we get there. If you look at the teacher comparisons, one of the things we're looking at mathematically are the differences in terms of salaries. Keep going. Almost there, about 1,000 slides, right? Almost there. There we go, okay. So if you look at these differences, just let's call out an example. Look at the state average difference in a T4 level salary. It's in upwards of $2,800, $2,600. But if you go forward to administrative differences, the difference, they are significantly different. If you look at the comparison, let's just say hypothetically, a Monroe, a Houston, and don't tell me about I said Houston, y'all. Please don't tell me Seoul I said Houston. Can you delete that? If you look at those in comparison, you get a significant difference in those admin salaries. So as we think about right sizing, we're taking a look at certain levels of departments and divisions and school level leadership in terms of right size opportunities, where a raise wouldn't be in service of that, but consideration of a right size opportunity is on the table.
One last thing. I noticed that we just issued an RFP for looking at school consolidation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I know we've been talking about potential for school consolidation during the last budget cycle. I guess the question I have is, why now and not a year ago? Issue an RFP for someone to take a look at this for us.
Yes, a good question. We did, just in line with a good time to do it. We didn't do it last year. I know that we had, we rolled back our millage rate, and we got so roles of looking for cost-saving opportunities within the organization, and we wanted to give ourselves sufficient time. If we were to have started last year, it probably would not have started until around October. In my professional opinion, that would not have given us a sufficient enough runway, both for the board and also for the community to be involved and engaged in whatever findings or recommendations, as opposed to now, in putting out an RFP in March, that gives us well over a year to get that work started, to get information to said consultant and engage in at least a year of engagement. We recognize it is a contentious issue, and anytime you have a contentious issue like that, you want to give it the right time. Had I done it last year, it would have been around this same time frame, and I didn't feel like we were in a space or place in March this past year to engage in that discussion.
Well, as you pointed out, this is a long process. It could be contentious. Having started that process 6 months earlier might have been some benefit to getting folks at least to look at the idea, as opposed to waiting to March of this year.
Agreed, but keep in mind what we're talking about is getting started early now for FY26 considerations. So it's one of those elements that sits in space of not just short-term cost savings opportunities, but long-term cost saving opportunities.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Bush, thank you for your presentation to you and your team. First, I want to just commend the team for the preparation that they've taken for this budget season, FY25. I think you all have definitely done the charge that this board provided last year, and which was to conduct a program resource audit. And that was what we had saw as being the top need before we consider school consolidations. So thank you for that work, and look forward to the final program resource audit that we will receive. Also, Mr. Bush, when we talk about right sizing, when you say that one of the additional items that could be considered with right sizing is rezoning?
I would say that could be a possibility, especially with how construction projects are going around town.
Very well. Just wanted to make sure that we have that as one of our possible options that we consider as we are right sizing. Next is regards to the increase for pay for our educators. Did I hear you right to say it's 2% for certified and 5% for classified?
That's correct.
Okay. And is that 2 and 5% over the amount that the state has is in the plans to approve?
Yeah, so the state only gives certified the $2,500 increase. So the idea behind that was the additional 2% would provide them around a 5% on average teacher increase, and this classified around a 5% average.
So for the average certified employee, what would that look like as far as dollar amounts?
Around, I believe it's around 5,000.
5,000? And then for our classified would be how much?
I'm not sure what the average is at this point, but we can get you that detail.
Okay, I would appreciate that. Next on page 22, slide 22. For the school allocation formulas for classroom teacher through kindergarten, I see that there was a cross through of the number 28 to 25. Was that a local decision or was that a state level mandate?
That was actually in there from the previous year, so we left it in there as a note, but that was agreed upon either last year or the year before that, actually.
Okay, so I would
The
read
state
this.
minimum is 28.
28.
We decided as a local district to keep it at 25.
So one teacher per 25 students in elementary school,
Yes, sir.
which is lower than the state mandated average.
Right.
Correct, thank you. Next on page 34. At the bottom, do I read this correct? For the cost per student for all the expenses for the FY25 budget is $3,006, is that correct?
That's the cost for the department totals, admin costs. The $12,649 would be the grand total cost per student.
And where is that?
Right below.
Oh, I see it, okay.
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. Lastly, and just a follow-up to Ms. Johnson's question earlier, I think if we could see a chart to show what the state versus the local funded positions are and our schools that are operating under the number of students that the school should be built for, in a sense, then there'll be good information to help us as we continue this budget process into the future. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes. Saw Dr. Garrett Boyd's hand first.
I just wanted to add one more thing. Mr. Jackson, kindergarten also has a full-time parapro, so that helps with that in kindergarten, that lower teacher ratio. That's developmentally appropriate.
Thank you, Dr. Garrett Boyd. Dr. Woodford.
Yes, my question, well, first of all, thank you so much for you pulling this together. This is always hard for me to read sometimes, but you've done an excellent job in explaining everything. But my question is for Dr. Jones, excuse me.
He says Houston, you say Jones.
I know, we're this side of the table. So, Dr. Sims, are there other factors that you are considering when you came up with this recommendation?
Oh,
Other than cost savings?
Okay, I'm not clear on your question. What?
So this is the preliminary budget recommendation
Yes.
that you have presented for us. So as you were making these considerations, what were you thinking about? So I see that you have these priorities listed here. So when you think about these priorities, are there any other factors that you think about or are considering for, like, such as the neighborhood schools?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will say an overarching factor is just making sure that we're in place to meet the needs of our students, the diverse needs of our students. As you mentioned, our neighborhood schools, and perhaps any schools that may be in need of additional resources, additional support, whether it is in the area of literacy, retaining the best staff, ensuring that school improvement resources are funneled in that right space. All of that, I would say, serves as an umbrella of all the considerations. And all of these are in service to even a neighborhood school. I recognize that we're in a space where we have a diversity of needs across our buildings. And I would say from that perspective, another big factor was not just neighborhood schools, but since we're talking about neighborhood schools who perhaps are in a space where ARP funding has significantly helped to maintain or promote what is happening inside that school. We're asking ourselves the question, well, what happens if said support, said resources are now taken away because of the dissolution of funds? That was another significant factor that we are taking into account, that we have taken into account, and will continue to. And I will say that as we engage, even now in the audit, we're looking at our highest need school and perhaps a school that is in a better space as we consider what those final pieces will look like. And some of that may end up translating into it will end up translating to some differentiated supports based on needs at schools. In some cases, you have an overlap of neighborhood schools and schools who perhaps receive state-level support. And one of the things that is called out in that space is to ensure that there's something above and beyond that is happening in those schools in support of what those goals are. So we take that into account as well. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions, board members? Ms. Hammond.
Back again. Just one quick question, looking at the teacher salary comparisons, with the recommended, basically across the board, 5% increases, do those graphs, do the green bars get a little bit closer to the state averages with those proposed increases?
That's a great question. Me and Dr. Sims talked about it today. We're going to get some information on that, about what that impact does, how that gets us closer to the mean of these districts or the different studies we're showing.
If I can add to that question, it could potentially get us closer to what you see on this paper. but we have to wait and see what the other 179 superintendents and their districts decide, because that could become a moving target.
Any other questions, board members? Well, I have a follow-up question then. As for the RFP regarding consultant looking at consolidation of schools, are they looking at consolidation and rezoning as potential recommendations? And I don't know if that's a...
Dr. Sims may be better.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say we would want them to consider both of those. I think those are both imperatives in this space. So in terms of a level of expertise, that would be some of the questions we would have in service to that. And if I hear our Board of Education giving me the blessing to ensure that that is the focus, then we'll make sure we follow up and that the individuals responsible for that final selection will follow suit.
Follow-up to that, often when we talk about consolidation or we talk about rezoning, we look at the fact that we've got 11 elementary schools in the red, but we also have a large number of high schools in the red. So are we looking at high school, middle school, and elementary, or are we just focusing on just the elementary schools in that consulting?
So ideally, I want the consultant to look at the district and to give us something that can not only serve us in the FY26, something that'll extend beyond that time potentially.
Okay.
And the first thing that I would want for that group to do is to take a close look at our data, much of which we've shared this evening, but digging under the hood to get some trend data and then do what they do in terms of that expertise level.
Thank you. Board members, any other questions or concerns?
And I have my deputy superintendent, she's online. I'm just confirming that all scenarios are in the RFP. Just want to make sure we confirm.
Very good. All right. Well, hearing nothing else, Mr. Bush, I want to thank you for your presentation. Dr. Sims, thank you for your presentation as well. I believe that concludes the presentation. I'll let you give us some closing remarks.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Board President Freeman. If I could just take a moment and just offer my appreciation to our finance team and the concern over ensuring from a technological standpoint, we keep ourselves in the space to provide the best for the district, and especially what happens inside the classrooms. Those are three critical factors. If there's anything we wanted to do during this time frame is to give you, as our Board of Education, a good set of preliminary informational pieces as we continue this season. But I think we are well positioned with our finance team to be timely in response to the concerns and the things that you've raised to us. And we hope that what we've given you today puts you in a good space in our first information session, budget work session. Thank you, Board President Freeman.
Thank you, Dr. Sims. With that, I don't believe we have any other business on the agenda, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved by Dr. Woodford. Seconded, I saw Dr. Dilertan first, so I'll recognize her. All in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you.